The wind howled like a wounded animal as Chris Parker adjusted his thin jacket and crouched beside his old, rusted pickup truck, cursing under his breath. Rain pelted down in cold sheets as he fought with the lug wrench, trying to loosen the final bolt on the flat tire. His fingers were numb, his muscles aching from another exhausting 14-hour shift at the lumber yard. The late shift was all that was available, and he couldn't afford to say no, not when the rent was 2 weeks overdue and his daughter's asthma medication was almost out. From inside the truck, 5-year-old Lily watched him with wide, worried eyes, her small face barely visible through the fogged-up window. She was bundled in a puffy pink coat that had seen better days, holding a worn-out teddy bear that used to belong to her mother. Chris glanced at her, his heart tightening. He smiled to reassure her, even though his stomach was tight with hunger and stress. Ever since Mia, his wife, died in a car accident 2 years ago, Chris had been in survival mode. Grief didn't come with an instruction manual, and neither did single parenting. He'd learned to cook on a budget, to stretch $1 into a week's worth of meals, and how to mask the panic that hit when Lily's asthma flared up in the middle of the night and he had no inhaler. He was exhausted, but he wasn't broken. Not yet. As he finally replaced the flat tire, he heard the sudden screech of tires in the distance. A silver sedan swerved onto the shoulder of the road and stopped a few yards behind him. The driver's side door flung open. A woman stumbled out, barefoot, her clothes soaked and torn, her face bruised and bleeding. In her arms, she clutched a toddler, barely 3 years old, wrapped in a thin, soaked blanket. Chris stood upright in alarm. "Hey! Are you okay?" The woman didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the woods behind her. "Please, he's coming. Help us," she whispered, her voice raw and shaking. Then she collapsed. Chris rushed forward, catching the child before he fell and lowering the woman gently to the ground. Her lip was split, her arm twisted at an odd angle. The boy whimpered but clung tightly to her. "Lily, stay in the truck," Chris shouted. He lifted the woman and child into the cab of his pickup, turned the heater to max, and sped toward the nearest hospital, 20 miles away. He didn't think about what this would mean. He didn't think about bills, or cops, or accusations. He just acted. At the hospital, the woman was immediately taken in. The toddler, Mateo, was checked for injuries and found to be in shock but physically unharmed. Chris sat in the waiting area with Lily asleep on his lap, his hoodie wrapped around her. He didn't know why his chest hurt more than his muscles did, but something about the woman's fear, raw and real, stayed with him. A nurse approached. "You brought them in?" He nodded. "She wants to speak with you." Chris walked into the dimly lit hospital room. The woman was awake now, her face pale, eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved us." Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and she had been running for nearly 2 weeks. Her boyfriend, Rick, had started with cruel words, then fists, then threats that he'd hurt Mateo if she ever tried to leave. She had finally made her escape that night, sneaking out of a window with her son in her arms while Rick was passed out drunk. But he had woken up. He had chased her down the road. He was right behind her when Chris appeared. Chris clenched his jaw. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said softly, "not anyone. Most people turn away." That night, Chris couldn't sleep. Lily curled up beside him in the hospital waiting room, and Chris stared at the ceiling. The shelter had no room for Elena and Mateo, so they would have to stay in the hospital until space opened up. He couldn't stop thinking about it. How many more women were out there, running, hiding, trying to survive? He didn't know, but it haunted him. The next morning, police came. Chris tensed, unsure what this meant. Would he be questioned? Accused? But Elena reached for his hand. "He helped me. Don't let them take him away. Detectives explained that Rick wasn't just a violent partner, he was connected to a larger criminal network suspected of trafficking and abuse. Elena's escape, her injuries, and her story gave them a legal opening they'd been waiting months for. Thanks to Chris's 911 call and testimony, they now had the evidence to act. Within 2 days, Rick was in custody. But what the police revealed next stunned everyone. Rick wasn't just a domestic abuser. He had been on the radar for over a year, suspected of involvement in a multi-state human trafficking ring. But authorities had no solid witness willing to testify, until Elena. She had seen the signs: women locked in basements, strange visitors, girls who came and never left. But she was afraid, until now. Chris was in disbelief. "I just thought she needed help." "You didn't just help her," the detective said. "You helped uncover a network we've been chasing for months. Because of Elena's testimony, and your intervention, we've rescued 6 women and 2 children from homes connected to Rick's operation." Chris sat there stunned. He had just been trying to change a tire. In the following weeks, everything shifted. Chris stayed in touch with Elena and Mateo. The shelter eventually found them a temporary home, and Lily insisted they visit often. She and Mateo became fast friends, giggling in the backyard as if they hadn't seen too much pain for their young hearts. Chris, still struggling financially, got a call from someone unexpected, a local news anchor who wanted to interview him. At first, he refused. He wasn't a hero. He was just a tired dad who got lucky that night. But when the interview aired, something surprising happened. The community responded. Donations poured in for Elena and her son. A local business owner offered Chris part-time construction work at double his previous pay. Another viewer, who ran a nonprofit for single fathers, offered him a paid position as a program coordinator. Chris hesitated. "I've never worked at an office before." "You don't need a suit," the woman said. "You need heart. And you've got plenty of that." Months passed. Chris's new job focused on helping other struggling fathers, those who had lost wives, battled depression, or didn't know where to turn. He told them his story not because he had all the answers, but because he understood. Elena began volunteering at the same shelter that had helped her. She took counseling courses, wanting to work with survivors of abuse. She told her story bravely, reminding others that it's not weakness to ask for help, it's courage. And one day, Chris stood in his tiny backyard, watching Lily and Mateo play under the setting sun. Elena brought out lemonade, smiling as she brushed her hair back. There was a calm in her face he hadn't seen before. No fear. Just peace. Lily tugged on Chris's arm. "Daddy, is Mateo my brother now?" Chris knelt beside her, smiling. "He's family, sweetheart. And so is his mom." Elena looked at him, her eyes shining. "You saved us. Not just from Rick, but from staying afraid." Chris shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a ride." She laughed gently. "Sometimes, that's all someone needs." The moral wasn't about heroism. It was about humanity. Chris didn't wear a cape. He didn't have money or power. He had nothing but a broken-down truck, calloused hands, and a heart that refused to turn away from suffering. But because he chose to stop, to act, he helped not just Elena and Mateo, but dozens of others. It's easy to walk past pain, to look away from danger, to assume someone else will handle it. But sometimes, the difference between tragedy and salvation is one ordinary person choosing not to ignore a cry for help. And in that decision, lives can be changed. Sometimes even saved. If this story moved you, remember this. Be the one who pulls over. Be the one who checks in. Be the one who refuses to look away. Because the world doesn't just need heroes in uniforms. It needs people like you.